Today we're looking at the rising cost of EV charging. We'll start out with hidden EV costs that most people forget to consider. We'll also talk about why the cost of EV batteries are also on the rise. Hang tight because EVs might not be as glamorous as you may think. Ever hear the term EV thinking? It's a way of viewing EVs based on the fact that most cars are parked for at least 90% of the day. That means that as long as an EV slow charges for even a small percentage of the time it's parked, it should get all the charge it needs to cover that 10% of the time you're on the road. In theory, this means charging is less of a hassle since your car won't be doing much else if it was just parked on the street anyway. Also, this type of approach towards charging isn't as hard on an EV's battery, and it lowers total charging costs because slow charging equipment is a lot cheaper than fast charging ones. Not many people know this, but actually, there's a lot of hidden costs you probably don't know about when it comes to EVs. Here are just a few. Your electric vehicle might have higher insurance costs than you may think. It's true, most electric cars have less moving components, and generally they don't need as much maintenance. But that doesn't change the fact that insuring some EVs can cost you a lot more than a gas-powered car. For example, a Chevrolet Bolt can cost $1,884 a year to insure, but a Honda Insight might only cost you $1,700. That's almost a $200 difference. The thing is, insurance companies have far less data on EV repair costs, frequency, and severity compared to the volume of data they have on conventional cars. Reason is because EVs have been in the market for much less time compared to standard vehicles, and that's why it can be hard to determine the average cost to repair and replace parts compared to the traditional combustion engine vehicle. So you can see why many car insurance companies, at least for now, charge higher car insurance premiums to insure electric vehicles. At-home chargers are another hidden EV cost some consumers forget to factor in. When you install a charger at home, it increases your EV cost. For example, level 2 chargers can cost anywhere between $300 and $700. Plus, you have to add the installation fee, and that is an extra $750 if a 240-volt outlet is required. That said, state governments and local utility services are trying to help consumers offset some of the costs of buying and installing an EV charger at home. For instance, some offer tax credits or even rebates. Consider too, there's a federal tax credit which is 30% or up to $1,000. Another hidden cost to consider is EV battery replacement cost. The problem is EV batteries aren't cheap. They can cost anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 just for the battery alone. And that does not include the labor cost of installing it. The price range is huge, somewhere between an arm and a leg. And even the cheapest battery is still going to cost you a painful chunk from your wallet. By the way, due to the Inflation Reduction Act, EV makers have been trying to ramp up their EV production. And here's the thing, it's not gas prices that will drive up the demand for electric cars. Actually, you have to look at EV batteries, or specifically the cost of EV batteries. It's common knowledge that the battery is one of the costliest parts of an electric vehicle. In theory, the more affordable batteries become, the more it should drive up consumer demand. Now, industry analysts are optimistic that in the coming years, battery prices will dip and level to a point someday where the sticker price for EVs will be the same as the sticker price for gas-powered cars. And that's where they say EVs will take off more than before. But here's where you might see a plot twist. The past 10 years or so, battery costs have been declining in general. But sad to say, EV batteries actually increased 7% in cost last year. The reason is because the cost of raw materials rose highly. I'm talking about raw materials that are critical to making EV batteries, especially materials like lithium, nickel, and cobalt. For example, lithium alone skyrocketed 500% last year. And if you think that was bad, you might want to cover your ears to the next part. Industry experts believe that demand for EV battery materials will make the cost of these batteries skyrocket even higher. In fact, it could even result in narrowing the EV market to just luxury EVs. I'm talking about luxury EVs that are priced at $100,000 or more. As it is, the average American can't afford an EV. So just imagine if the EV market gets reduced to luxury electric vehicles only. Right now, car makers have been experimenting to develop different types of batteries that don't need certain raw materials. Obviously, it's the perfect scenario, but realistically, it's not something that they'll accomplish overnight. It'll take time, and then, personally, I don't see the cost of EV batteries, and therefore the cost of the electric vehicle, to go down to the point of affordability in the near future. It's no big news that most EVs on the market today are more expensive to purchase than your average combustion car. Outside of that, you have the cost to charge your EV. Many variables impact this, but to simplify matters, the general formula is to divide your EV's maximum range by its range per kilowatt hours, then multiply it by the average cost of electricity per kilowatt hour. Now, the cost to charge at home depends largely on your electricity provider's rate, the time you charge, and the cable you use, plus the model itself that you have. Different electricity providers charge different rates. Right now, the average residential electricity rate in the U.S. is 16 cents per kilowatt hour. But in California, for example, it's about 27 cents per kilowatt hour. Regardless of where you live, analysts in general anticipate at-home charging costs will increase over time due to rising inflation and rising electricity costs, among other factors. Keep in mind, too, that electricity rates are usually higher during the day and lower at night. So the time of day you charge your EV at home can impact the total cost. Typically, at-home charging costs are lower if you charge your EV at night. Then there's also the type of charger you use. If you're using a level 1 charger, the power output will be low. So even though the electricity cost per minute will be lower, the overall charging time will be longer. On the other hand, if you use a faster charger, it'll take less time, but the overall power output per minute may be higher. Another factor is your EV model itself and the battery. Some EV models take longer to charge than others. For example, if you have a Tesla with a long-range battery and you're using a level 1 charger, it can take days for your EV to get fully charged at 110 volts. But now, let's say you want to charge at a public charging station, say, for example, at one of Electrify America's charging stations. Well, premium members pay a $4 monthly subscription, but if you use the chargers as a guest in California, you're looking at charging costs of 43 cents per kilowatt hour. Or if you're on a Premium Pass Plus member, a standard charger will cost you 31 cents per kilowatt hour. The thing about Electrify America is that the rates differ depending on the state. Some states like California have a fixed rate for kilowatt hours, while other states like Texas charge based on minutes and kilowatt hours. Public charging cost also depends on the type of EV you have. For example, let's say you own a Tesla. The thing about Tesla is that there are no one set price charged by all Tesla charging stations. That's because different EV models require different amounts of time to charge. Charging your EV at one of Tesla's supercharger stations can cost you 24 cents per kilowatt hour for off-peak hours between 9 p.m. and 11 a.m. and 48 cents per kilowatt hour during peak hours. But if you use one of Tesla's standard chargers, it'll cost you nothing. But they're nowhere near as powerful as Tesla's supercharging stations. Speaking of public charging stations, let's talk about EV charging infrastructure, or rather, the lack thereof. Truth be told, right now the amount of companies with a sizable EV charging network here in the States is sadly small. Most EV charging stations across the States are level 2 chargers. But level 2 chargers aren't the best choice when you need to get back on the road as soon as possible. That's why there's a need not only for a wider network of stations, but also for DC fast chargers. Right now, there are some 50,000 public charging stations in the U.S. and almost 130,000 individual charging ports. Yet, of those 50,000 charging stations, some 44,000 are level 2 stations and only 6,600 are DC fast charging stations. Now, there are some 8,500 non-networked EV charging stations in the U.S. with 18,000 charging ports, but almost all of those are only level 2 charging ports. Right now, just 4 companies account for the majority of DC fast chargers here in the States. Tesla's supercharger network has about 60% of the 26,000 DC fast charging ports in America. Electrify America, ChargePoint, EV, Go have about 7,600 fast charging ports combined, or about 29% of the total fast charging ports out there. Actually, Tesla is the only automotive brand who owns and operates their own proprietary charging network. GM and Ford have announced plans for their own large networks, which will come eventually. But even then, their plans are primarily based on partnerships with existing networks that offer only level 2 stations with some DC fast charging stations. So right now in North America, you can use the supercharger network only if you own a Tesla. But in the near future, Tesla plans to open up its charging networks to all EVs. Electrify America has around 800 charging stations and 3,600 fast charging ports here in the U.S. Believe it or not, the Volkswagen Group of America actually owns Electrify America. And Electrify America is the only comprehensive DC fast charging network where you can charge EVs that are not Teslas. And on top of that, the company is also one of the few networks that can charge up to 350 kilowatts, which is higher than Tesla superchargers that max out at 250 kilowatts. By the way, Ford is one of many providers that's partnering with Electrify America. So if you own a Mach-E, that means you get 250 kilowatt hours of free DC fast charging at certain Electrify America stations. EVgo is a charging company that is based out of Tennessee. EVgo has around 2,200 fast charging ports in the U.S. Although you can sign up for a discount for DC fast charging, you can still use the charging network without a subscription. At its fast charging stations, you'll find speeds between 100 kilowatts and 350 kilowatts. Did you know GM made a deal with EVgo to launch over 2,700 DC fast charging stations between now and 2025? All these locations will have around 4 charging ports per site that can deliver 350 kilowatts each. Then there's ChargePoint. Actually, it's the largest charging network in the U.S. It's headquartered in California, but it's primarily only a level 2 network. We're talking 50,000 charging ports, where just 1,700 of them are DC fast chargers. Now, ChargePoint differs from its competitors because it lets each property owner set its own pricing and absorb the cost of the electricity used. Many of ChargePoint's level 2 stations are free to use. Now, if EV demand rises as quickly as experts expect, the U.S. seriously needs to expand our charging infrastructure. To reach where we need by 2030, analysts say we'll need 80 DC fast charging ports and 8,500 level 2 chargers to come online each and every day. And those are new ones every day setting up. But now you tell me, did any of the hidden EV costs surprise you? What are the EV charging costs where you live? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.